Have a very productive 2 days. Thank you.
The fireworks are started. And I'm hoping that some people will reply, Professor Sage. There is never unanimity.
It's Sage, Chairman, Presidential Advisory Committee Against
Even
Corruption, paving the way for today's discourse, which is nothing but corruption and corruption.
In various callings,
no doubt, corruption is Nigeria's greatest challenge and is directly associated with the current economic decline. Poverty rate, reduced life expectancy, mortality, and the deteriorated living standards experienced by citizens. Beyond its developmental implications, the promotion and strengthening of democratic institutions and values are diminishing day in, day out. Corruption is the enemy of development and good governance, and that is why this program is on today.
Before I invite our distinguished chairman to give his remarks, let me recognize the presence of Mr. Innocent K. Ogbonnaya, Permanent Secretary CMO in the Office of the Head of Service. He's representing the Head of Service. Let me also recognize Alhaji Mohammed Buka, who is the PSGSO, representing the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. The Inspector General is being represented by DIG Abila Joshak, DIG Operations. Please join me as I welcome Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the chairman of today's occasion, to give more fireworks. Don't be politically correct. Don't be politically correct. Just say it as it is. May I request that we please switch our phones off or put them on silent. Now, if your phone is a Chinese phone, I advise that you separate the phone and its battery by at least 50 meters. Because even if you switch off Chinese phones, they have this knack for waking up. I don't know how it happens. So please, just separate phone and battery 50 meters apart. Thank you.
Acting President, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, representative of the Senate President, honorable ministers, chairman, and the members of the Presidential Advisory Committee, and all protocol observed, to use the totally inaccurate but very helpful shorthand. It's a great honor and unique privilege to be invited to chair this unique occasion. And I thank the acting president for finding time to be here in person. And one thing is clear, whatever the political disagreements, it is the unparalleled determination of this administration to succeed in the fight against corruption, including the determination to retrieve from abroad and at home the huge mind-boggling monies which were stolen from our country's commonwealth. And we have to commend that. And that is why it is imperative to give our support to the government while insisting on a permanent end to impunity and zero tolerance for official corruption in Nigeria. Now, I wish to make, in the interest of time, just about 6 main points, essentially the headlines, because I have a paper which can be circulated. First is that increased success in meeting the challenges facing Nigeria, or indeed any nation, and lasting change cannot be achieved by one person alone, whatever his antecedents and whatever his discommitment may be. In Nigeria's case, we have our president, President Buhari, who, like the Caesar's wife, is above suspicion. But in the typical spirit of our people, it's like leave everything to Buhari. This kind of abrogation of collective responsibility has to stop. Because we have to ask the question, where are Buhari's flag bearers in the fight against corruption in all the 36 states of the Federation, or local government, or in the private sector? Where are they? Are members of the elite in Nigeria part of the solution or part of the problem? I think in the acting president in his recent inauguration of SDGs, Private Sector Advisory Group, said that the elite are part of the problem. But we also have to make them part of the solution. I recall when my tenure as permanent representative of Nigeria was coming to an end at the United Nations, very long tenure, unlikely to be, it's unusual time, unless record to be broken. I told my son, who was 13, that never mind this title of permanent representative. Actually, we are not permanent, and my tenure is ending, and I want to go back to Nigeria. He said, no. And I said, you better get ready to go. He said, no. He's not going to Nigeria. I said, why not? He said, well, Nigeria has not entered the technological age yet. And he can't go back to a country that has not entered the technological age yet. So I told him, I said, well, you are the people to come and help us enter this technology. He said, no. Those of you who ruin the country should fix it first. And then invite me to come back to Nigeria. So those who have ruined or are ruining Nigeria must also not only be held to account, but they must be part of the solution. I also want to draw attention to the fact that we don't have a sustained national conversation in reducing the high and growing cost of governance at the federal, state, and local level, which already contribute to this endemic corruption. So I'm arguing that the sustainability of the fight against corruption in the context of an agenda for change must involve a collective national endeavor to open a new chapter in our national life that will represent both a clean break with the past and the opening of a new gateway to the future. So the nation's elite must be part of the solution and not remain the largest part of the problem. And we must not leave everything to Buhari. That's an abrogation of responsibility on the part of all of us. Second, the institutions of governance, including especially the judiciary. I used to hear that justice delayed is justice denied, but it's like justice delayed is the norm. Well, we have a new Chief Justice of the Federation, and to whom a lot is given, from him a lot will be expected as the head of the judiciary. Professor Issei Sage and I go back many years. We often speak the same language but in different ways. I have grown much older, but he still remains young at heart. So I'm suggesting we have to have strong institutions to go along with strong leadership in the fight against corruption. Third, in the fight against corruption in Nigeria, we must complement the approach of arrest and punishment of corrupt officials with a revamped national reward system. There are many Nigerians, including public officers, who are decent and honest. But then, do we have a sustained, decent system of rewards? It's not enough to just arrest, prosecute, and jail people, but we also need the development of role models, especially for our youths. Fourth, the pursuit of the contemporary agenda of fight against corruption. In that pursuit, close attention will need to be paid to the measures and steps that will need to be taken to overcome grinding poverty and want among Nigerians. So it's not as if we can choose between fighting corruption and making life better for the majority of our people. The two must go hand in hand. Otherwise, the enemy of the fight against corruption will use the state of the economy or the poverty in the land to justify walking away from that fight. So it's not a choice, but both. Fifth, this dialogue should address the issue of our values, norms, and customs as a nation and examine factors that promote sustainable hunger for wealth and corruption. Issei Sage has already mentioned some of that. But also, let's be frank, how can we be celebrating people who have been found guilty and sentenced for corruption? And we belong to the same nation? Is something wrong with us? If we cannot do what we need to do ourselves and somebody else outside does it by jailing corrupt officials, That is not a source of celebration. It should be a source of embarrassment for all of us. Because the message should be that the resources of Nigeria belong to all Nigerians. And we must all be united to preserve our resources for the present and future generation. It was an American president, Harry Truman, who put it very nicely, and I quote, "We have a responsibility not only to our compatriots, but also to future generations. A responsibility to preserve resources that belong to them as well as to us, and without which none of us can survive." Sixth and finally, the efforts to locate and repatriate stolen monies require aggressive push as well as collaboration with foreign countries. The scale of fraudulent transfer of our resources abroad have been identified in a report of the African Union High-Level Panel on Illicit Financial Flows headed by Thabo Mbeki. And it shows that what Africa has been losing annually through illicit transfer of finances are more than what the continent receives in development aid from abroad, or even foreign direct investment combined. Moreover, according to another report by the Global Financial Integrity, GFI, a Washington-based research and advocacy organization, reveals that Africa lost about $854 billion in illicit financial outflows from 1970 to 2008. And of this, Nigeria tops all the countries in Africa with close to $90 billion US dollars. Let me not preempt the resolution and communique that will be coming from this dialogue. Needless to say that with the caliber of people that have been assembled here and the quality of discussions that is emphasized, I feel sure that we're going to have very frank deliberations with actionable and viable recommendations for our policymakers and the population at large, the result of which will contribute to moving Nigeria forward to a new level of accomplishment and pride in the Community of Nations. I'm always fond of recalling an incident, true story, in January 1984, when the then General Buhari, head of the military government, received the then Secretary General of the UN, Perez de Cuellar of Peru. And President General Buhari asked him, "We're a new administration, please, you have a lot of experience, you're a global citizen, what do you advise us to do?" And the man said, "Do you want a frank answer or a diplomatic answer?" And General Buhari said, "Of course, a frank answer." He said, "Well, I'm from a developing country, Peru, and people used to say of Peru that Peru is a potentially rich and powerful country. But they have been saying that for the last 200 years. Let it not be said of Nigeria that it is a giant of Africa, potentially rich and powerful. Let them not continue to say that for the next 200 years. Translate your potentials into reality, tangible reality, so that your people will benefit from the conversion of your potential to reality." I think in the end, that's what we need to do. Finally, let me once again thank His Excellency Acting President and the Chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Sage, and his colleagues, while also welcoming all participants to this hugely important national dialogue. Very timely, more than timely, overdue. I wish us all fruitful deliberations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
You heard it
sir.
all from former Nigeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Professor Ibrahim Gambari. He says Nigeria's elite that have been part of the problem have no choice than to be part of the solution. And solution here means zero tolerance to corruption. Thereafter, goodwill messages will be coming in, starting from the Senate President and the newest Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onoge, and of course the Accountant General of the Federation will be attended as well to give a goodwill messages.
Of Nigerians are either Christians or Muslims. We're praying that and asking that faith-based groups will isolate the thieves in the fold and not celebrate them. because the holy books that we all use do not celebrate them. We should not celebrate them. They should be isolated. They should be branded for what they are. They should be confined to where they belong. We're hoping that the media who are participating with this will honestly educate the public and not also celebrate those who are raping the Commonwealth. We're hoping that civil society organizations would also be sufficiently outraged to challenge corruption. It is when everybody does what they are supposed to do that we can get the kind of results that we expect. And of course, the public institutions, arms of government, everybody will play their role. This is what we expect. But if we come out of this place with a resolution that corruption is very good, then you can expect that Professor Sage and I will start stealing before we leave here. It's definite. It's definite. I want to recognize and welcome members of the diplomatic community who are in our midst, ambassadors and development partners. We have very short goodwill messages, and we're going to reverse the order of what you find in the program. We'll start first with a representative of the fund, the donor fund that is supporting the work of PACAC. And they are being represented. There are 3 foundations who have put together money to support our work, notably the Ford Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, and Open Society Initiative for West Africa. One of them will give a very short remark to be closely followed by another development partner who is supporting some of the work going on in Nigeria, DFID. That will be represented by Oliver Blake. And then we'll have a few more goodwill messages. Very short, 2 or 3 minutes. Please join me in welcoming Judy Lowe to represent the development partners, the fund supporting PACAC. Please clap for him. Thank you very much. Can you make way by behind the camera? Oliver, just get ready. Once Jude steps out of here, just come and take your shot.
Your Excellency, the Acting President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, other justices here present, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by extending appreciation to the Office of the Vice President and the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption for inviting us to this very important conversation. On behalf of the MacArthur, Ford, and Open Society Foundations, I applaud you for this timely convening around an issue that has been the bane of development in Nigeria since independence. We're excited about our ongoing partnership with the government of Nigeria to support the efforts to strengthen the anti-corruption fight and to ensure an effective and credible criminal justice system. The Anti-Corruption and Criminal Justice Fund, which was put together by our 3 foundations, is a demonstration of our commitment and faith in Nigeria in its efforts to root out corruption. The fight against corruption is not an easy one because it's become systemic and endemic. For a very long time, our economy, our national life has been sustained by corruption. Our politics was built around corruption. Our social language is corruption. There are many reasons why we got here, why Nigeria is on this path. But it is important to mention that governments in the past have paid lip service to addressing the challenge. Citizens have become accustomed to its prevalence and our systems are dependent on it. We fail in most instances to see the existential challenges that corruption poses for Nigeria. It is obvious that the country is going through very terrible times economically, and we are trying to find ways to get the country back on the path of prosperity. These realities, of course, are triggered in some ways by corruption in the country. But rather than these realities to be a deterrent, events continue to show the uncommon tolerance for corruption in Nigeria, which is often displayed in our shameless celebration of felons and obeisance to questionable wealth. Government has left no one in doubt that they are committed to fighting corruption. While there are concerns about method and effectiveness of its strategy, these concerns do not detract from the fact that this current effort is indeed unprecedented in the history of this country. It is imperative that government urgently adopt and release its holistic anti-corruption strategy. This strategy has been a draft for too long and need now to be a living document that provides clear roadmaps, measurable expectation, and a viable framework for fighting corruption. Every arm of government must be equally committed to this effort. The National Assembly, the judiciary must own this process. Government must also be keenly aware that corruption must fight back and will look for every means to discredit this process. Recent cases of judicial disobedience by government is regrettable and damages government's credibility and moral standing. It is also necessary that key government officials who are implicated or entangled in any way in corruption allegation should be investigated in a manner that elicits confidence and trust in the process. Any public perception that government is shielding corrupt officials damages the anti-corruption fight. And for this fight to succeed, Nigerians must be part of it. Citizens must perceive government to be fair, objective, and credible, because if government leads by example, Nigerians will follow. And we are convinced that if Nigerians buy into this effort, if there's a movement of citizens committed to fighting corruption, we are really unstoppable. And so this event gives us an opportunity to have that very important conversation. Civil society, professional organizations, faith-based groups must be part of this effort, must play a bigger role in ensuring that our anti-corruption fight is cohesive and effective. And before I leave the podium, let me also, as a Nigerian, respond to Professor Sage. I think it is a little bit disconcerting and a tad disrespectful if we tag every Nigerian who disagrees with us as ignorant. People who took to the streets did it because they believe in this country. There's nothing that they said in that demonstration that is false. They said the economy is bad, which is correct. They said that the Naira is doing badly, which is correct. They said they are hungry. The rights and the freedom of expression is the fundamental predicate of democracy. And we must allow citizens to voice their opinion, even if we find it stupid. The practice of a single narrative in a democracy is as destructive as a dictatorship. And I want to end with the eternal words of Francis Cardinal Arinze. He said, "No man is wrong all the time. Even a damaged clock is correct twice a day." I thank you for your attention.
Your Excellency, Acting President, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Lord Chief Justice, Representative, the President of the Senate, if I may stand on already established protocol. Firstly, let me present apologies from both our Deputy Head of Office, Ben Mellor, who's called in to respond urgently to our ministers, and indeed our High Commissioner, Paul Arkwright, who is on his way back to Nigeria from Ghana. Both would have wished to be here and provide their support to the anti-corruption battle which both Nigeria and the UK face. So it gives me great pleasure to be here representing the British government. The UK and Nigeria have a long history of cooperation and friendship over the years. We both share a determination to root out this blight called corruption on the growth of our economies, the health of our societies, our national and collective security, and even the integrity of the sports we love. So we're partners in fighting corruption in both our countries. Corruption is bad for development, bad for poor people, bad for business. Corruption takes away public trust in public officials and government institutions. It distorts markets and leads to the misallocation of resources. It leads to poverty, it leads to people dying, it leads to conflict, it can lead to famine. No country is immune from corruption, and governments need to work together and with partners from business and civil society to tackle it successfully. That is why the May 2016 London Anti-Corruption Summit, in which Nigeria played a very important role, was important to galvanise global action against corruption. 43 countries made some 600 new commitments to tackling corruption. So from our UK side, we think we are making good progress on our summit commitments. Although, as we all find, putting forward proposals and tackling corruption is a tough action and needs sustained commitment from all involved. So we are making progress on setting up a global forum for asset recovery, which will hold its first meeting in Washington this July. We're making progress in implementing our public central register of beneficial ownership information. We're proud to be the first G20 country to have achieved this, and we have a healthy 89% business compliance rate so far. So people in the UK who are trying to hide their assets should know that information will soon be made available. So let me congratulate the Nigerian government, civil society and business for all that has been done so far on the anti-corruption agenda. The government, with civil society, has moved forward to implement key commitments made at the summit. Very quickly, for example, Nigeria has honoured the commitment and joined the Open Government Partnership. The Civil Society Government Steering Committee has been set up and a National Action Plan co-created with civil society has been launched. Nigeria's progress on this has been commended globally. This is just one example of many reforms that Nigeria is taking forward. But tackling corruption requires a lot of things to be in place, as it is such a pervasive problem. It requires systems to be in place to ensure funds are spent properly. It needs attitudes in society to be attuned to the effort, and of course it needs a process to investigate, prosecute and sanction those who loot funds or otherwise distort the public effort. The UK is honoured to be supporting Nigeria in all these areas. In a few minutes, Chatham House will present to you findings from a study we commissioned some time ago to examine whether there are social norms around corruption in Nigeria, to look at the attitudes of society and to see what we can learn from that in terms of policy making. So we hope that that study will be useful to all policymakers who are looking at what can be done to tackle corruption. Our National Crime Agency is continuing to support investigations of Nigerians who think they can hide looted funds in the UK and to support the EFCC's work in Nigeria. And I can say that we remain committed to returning assets as soon as our judicial processes will allow. But I have to say that we can also be embarrassed sometimes by the slowness of judicial procedures. So I'm happy to announce that our UK ministers have approved a £20 million programme, anti-corruption in Nigeria, known as ACORN, that will support Nigeria's enforcement and behaviour change efforts. This programme should start later in the year. We're very grateful for all of those who have contributed to the design of that programme and indeed will be contributing and supporting its implementation. So let me end by reiterating that we continue to stand with Nigeria as we tackle corruption together and build more accountable institutions which deliver services, prosperity and security for all. So I wish everyone a very successful and productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I said there will be fireworks, and the fireworks started. Jude replied, Professor Sage, I'm hoping there will be more replies. So please get ready. Get ready. We're going to take a few more short goodwill messages from the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary in that order, as recorded, I think, in the Constitution. So it gives me great pleasure to invite the representative of the President of the Senate and the chairman of the Senate Committee on Corruption and Economic Crimes, Senator Chukwuka Utazi, to give a short goodwill message. I emphasize short. He's a tall man, so I need to emphasize short.
Thank you for your emphasis. The acting president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the CJN of Nigeria, Honorable Justice Walter Onoye, the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami San, Professor Ibrahim Gambare, the chairman of this occasion, Professor Ise Sage, the one that invited all of us here. Let me stand on the already established protocol. A good message from the Chairman of National Assembly, His Excellency Bukola Saraki. It is my privilege and honor to be invited to join other stakeholders in the national dialogue on the fight against corruption being organized by the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC. It is important that we continue to have intense discussions and interactions with a broad spectrum of the populace in order to internalize the message about the perils of corruption to our society and thereby enthrone not only attitudinal change but also institutional awareness of the strategies to eliminate corruption from the body politic. It is beyond question that corruption, in whatever form it manifests, is the greatest impediment to the development of Nigeria and the bane of our public service. The pervasive nature of corruption and the brazen display of ill-gotten wealth has made it public enemy number one in Nigeria. For this reason, special agencies have been created to deal with the issues of corruption because laws that are designed to address escalating social misnomers require specialized agencies to implement such laws. More importantly, beyond specialized agencies to cater for them, the political will of the government of the day to regard corruption as an affront to the societal cohesion and an impediment to growth is crucial. That is why it is gratifying that this government has placed the degree of a premium it has on the issues around corruption. The scale of corruption in Nigeria is such that it's no exaggeration to say that no enemy of Nigeria, within or without, will have done the kind of damage to the psyche, integrity, and ambitions of the nation as much as what corruption has already done. The fight against corruption, there is therefore need to generate a platform for continuous discussion on the issue around corruption, and I thank PACAC for this. The fight against corruption must be driven by well-articulated strategy. These strategies must be multifaceted, taken alongside all facets of Nigeria's political, economic, and social system, with each arm or department of government operating within their jurisdictions and mandates to secure a collective stakeholder stage about a fight. Deliberately casting the fight as that of one man, a kind of knight in shining armor, who wrestles with a resisting society, in my humble view, will not secure the desired result. Certain government agencies and civil society bodies, and PACAC is not innocent of this, have formed the habit of making a scapegoat of the National Assembly as done of corruption. They deliberately cast institutions of state on solitary hill that they are divorced from reality. It does not help in confidence building within government and across the civil population when institutions of state are deliberately demonized in order to put shine on others. As a critical stakeholder and partner in the mandate given to PACAC, it does not feel right when you man restrooms to say how badly the National Assembly has performed, how they have left their duties derelict, like you said, our so-called oversight functions, and how corrupt they are. Indeed, it is counterproductive for PACAC to do so, because its mandate of advising should be given across board to all arms and tiers of government in order to promote effectiveness of all government institutions and strengthen anti-corruption measures in a comprehensive manner. In the same vein, PACAC should not lend itself to supporting extra legal actions if the fight against corruption will be sustained and ingrained in the body politic. A situation where PACAC speaks in favor of patently extra-legal means of law enforcement does not bode well for the rule of law. The end result of any action of government is as important as the process. The platform for fighting corruption should not themselves be corrupt or be seen to be corrupted. The recent so-called sting operation by the Department of State Security on the residences of some very senior justices, some without warrants, others without any proof of incriminating body or evidence, leaves much to be desired. That is why we speak of government bodies operating within its mandate. Although the National Security and Justice Act of 1986 grants the SSS the powers to act in economic crimes of national security dimension, Section 6C of the Economic and Financial Crimes Act of 2004, as amended in a later enactment, vests the power for the coordination and enforcement of all economic and financial crimes laws and enforcement functions conferred on any other person or authority on the FCC. It is even more instructive that by Section 2(1)(e) of the EFCC Act, the Department of State Security sits on board of the EFCC and could easily, in their meetings, point out the persons or bodies the EFCC needs to investigate and prosecute, backed up by evidence it had clandestinely gathered. That sting operation was a needless violation of on our laws and an aberration that democratic society should consider anathema. The FCC should have been provided the necessary intelligence to execute its mandate if the evidence disclose a prima facie case against the justices. The Senate Committee on Anti-Corruption and Financial Crime, therefore, of the National Assembly welcomes this dialogue as it increases institutional awareness about the responsibilities we have and creates the right kind of environment for incremental but steady levels of information necessary to pump the adrenaline towards the attainment of a corrupt-free society. I also want to use this opportunity to thank the PACAC and all the people who are here to open up their minds for a national discourse. Thank you so much.
More fireworks. I'm very happy. I'm very, very happy that the National Assembly hears some of our criticisms and is responding to. There will be more fireworks. Opinion is divided as to whether or not the sting operation was popular or not popular, but I think Senator Chukwuka should take a poll and know whether or not it was welcome or not welcome. I think we've got to the point whereby we should stop pretending. We should just say it the way it is. We should hit ourselves very hard. If it is right, we say so. If it's not very right, too bad. We tell ourselves it's not very right. If you talk, you die. If you don't talk, you die. Why not talk and die? I think it's better to do it that way. So we talk, we die. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to give his short remarks.
Your Excellency, the Acting President and special guest of honor, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, SAN. My Lord, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Honorable Justice Walter Onoge, the Chairman, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Ise Sage, the Senate President, ably represented here this morning by distinguished Senator Otazi, Chairman, Senate Committee on Anti-Corruption, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the Chairman of the occasion, my colleagues, the Honorable Ministers and the Federal Executive Council of the Federation here present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
It is my honor and privilege to make this brief contribution at the opening ceremony of this epoch-making national dialogue on corruption here, which aims to make a significant contribution to the national discourse regarding the evils of corruption within our polity and the necessity for effective mechanisms to tackle it. Permit me to commence my contribution by commending the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, for the campaign against corruption and its associated vices in our country, which His Excellency, the Acting President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yomi Osinbajo, SAN, GCOAN, is taking out to lead the discussions here today. This is another demonstration of the high-level commitment of the present administration. In my capacity as the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, I can attest to the requisite political will by this administration, which has empowered my office and facilitated the significant achievements recorded thus far for the anti-graft war, inclusive of putting in place PACAC as a committee aimed at joining forces towards the fight against corruption. This administration has exhibited global efforts at tackling corruption. In 2003, when the world came together to sign the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, that entered into force in 2005, it was with a view to tackling the growing threat that corruption has become to all nations. Little did we know then that several years after the entry into force of this convention, that the problem of corruption will continue to be pervasive and indeed life-threatening. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now widely acknowledged that corruption undermines economic development, political stability, rule of law, social development, disrupts social order, and indeed destroys public trust in the governance system. In Nigeria, it is startling to note that the link between corruption, organized crime, terrorism, and insecurity is one of the reasons why we have remained underdeveloped despite the huge natural resources with which our country is endowed. The story is not different from that of many developing countries today. The truth is simply that we have not learned from the past. Since President Muhammadu Buhari came into office in May 2015, he made fighting corruption a major pillar of this government policy. Most importantly, he took steps to address what may be regarded as soft powers. By this, I mean deployment of various preventive tools and measures to tackle corruption. The measures which were introduced early on in this administration, and which some of us tend to forget, that changed the face of revenue generation and which significantly reduced diversion of public funds, among others, are as follows. The Treasury single account, hitherto impossible in Nigeria to make it impossible for public officers to divert public funds to personal accounts, had been put in place. The bank verification number, we have been able to remove more than 23,000 non-existing persons from our payroll, and by this singular act save billions of funds that will have been stolen. With regard to asset recovery, the President Buhari has also directed that all funds stolen from the public treasury and which can be traced to any individual or corporate body anywhere in the world should be recovered to assist this administration in the task of building a new Nigeria. The President has personally traversed different countries to seek for support in the repatriation of funds and in addressing the insecurity problems that have bedeviled the nation. The whistleblowers policy introduced recently has created another platform through which the government is engaging with citizens to recover stolen assets. Nigeria is one of the few countries of the world that have included civil society organizations in the tackling of stolen assets and monitoring the application of such funds when they are eventually returned. We are also working on establishing public register of beneficial owners in line with global standards. Multiple legislations are transmitted to National Assembly which are aimed at consolidating the fight against corruption campaign, including the Proceeds of Crime Act, Whistleblowers Act, and Money Laundering Act, among many others. I am happy to announce that we have made significant progress and that our efforts are paying out as most stolen funds have been recovered both domestically and more are expected from several countries in the world in the coming month. I will also speak briefly on President's commitment at the London Anti-Corruption Summit, as well as where we are in terms of implementing an open government agenda after becoming a full member of the Open Government Partnership. You may recall that during the London Anti-Corruption Summit in May 2016, President Buhari presented a country statement on actions that will be implemented by the government in Nigeria on anti-corruption reforms. The main objectives of the London Summit were to tackle corruption from three key strategies, inclusive of exposing corruption, punishing the corrupt, and supporting the victims who have suffered from corruption, and indeed driving out the culture of corruption wherever it exists. Within these three strategies, Nigeria has committed to specific preventive and enforcement actions, as well as international cooperation actions to address the concerns raised during the meeting. The country statement and subsequent action plan cover the following broad areas: establishment of public register of beneficial owners, preventing the facilitation of corruption by public and private sector officials, improving transparency in public procurement, tax, revenue, budget, and fiscal transparency, strengthening asset and recovery measures, and enhancing the transparent management of return assets, and indeed promoting integrity in public and private institutions. The federal government of Nigeria is equally committed to transparency and accountability, and indeed it is gladdening to note that Nigeria is now a full member of the Open Government Partnership, an international multi-stakeholders initiative aimed to improve transparency, accountability, and citizen participation in governance. We have now set off a national steering committee made up of multi-sector stakeholders from government, organized private sector, and civil society organizations. Nigeria has also completed a national plan on Open Government Partnership that was submitted to the International Open Government Partnership Summit in Paris in December 2016. It is the government positions that commitment to the promotion of open government partnership in Nigeria will resonate strongly with the message of change that this administration represents. With the dwindling of revenue from oil, it has become obvious that Nigeria must provide an enabling environment to attract foreign investors and to diversify the economy. One way of doing this is by assuring our international partners that Nigeria is open for business and that illicit finance will find no hiding place in Nigeria. I am delighted that many state governments have shown interest to join the Open Government Partnership initiatives. This is a welcome development, and we are encouraging more to come on board as we begin the process towards the articulation of the Open Government Partnership National Action Plan for Nigeria. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy is equally put in place and is being developed and reinforced. Over the first 8 years, efforts have been made by previous governments to develop a sustainable approach in fighting corruption. The objectives of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy include the promotion of an improved legal policy and regulatory environment for the fight against corruption, to encourage and improve socio-cultural and political environment for transparency, accountability, and integrity, to provide incentives for sustainability in the fight against corruption, to improve the operational capacities of key anti-corruption institutions and initiatives, and to achieve the presidential commitments on asset recovery, transparency, and accountability in the management of public resources. I have indicated that the anti-corruption strategy framework provides an opportunity for ongoing discussions on the way we fight corruption in Nigeria. It is not an end in itself and cannot solve the problems of corruption in Nigeria. In this regard, the Office of the Attorney General is open for recommendations on what can improve the manner in which we can improve the fight against corruption. However, it is important to recognize that there are key institutions such as the ICPC, CCB, and EFCC who have the core mandate to investigate corrupt practices. The role of the Ministry of Justice is to provide guidance, develop regulations, and ensure proper coordination and effective prosecution of all related matters, and indeed, the major plank is the provision of the advisory services by PACAC. Framework for the reform of the justice sector and its impact to anti-corruption efforts are equally put in place. The Office of the Attorney General has developed a framework for the reform of justice sector, known as the Justice Sector Reform Plan, hinged on 4 strategic objectives, namely to strengthen the legal drafting and law review process, to strengthen prosecution and enforcement mandates, to strengthen public engagement accountability system, and to support international and national coordination in justice institutions. It is our belief that there is a link between an effective criminal justice system underpinned by strong prosecution mandate and our ability to combat corruption. Consequently, early this year, President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated a National Prosecution Coordination Committee with a view to strengthening prosecutorial mandates of the Federal Ministry of Justice, as well as enhancing coordination of the prosecution of high-profile corruption cases. As part of the ongoing justice sector reform, the Office of the Attorney General and that of Attorneys General of the 36 states of the Federation recently issued and adopted the National Prosecution Policy and Prosecution Guidelines. The prosecution policy will help to streamline good practices amongst federal and state prosecutors and prosecuting agencies. This will no doubt lead to improved prosecution of corruption cases and other offenses, increase efficiency and effectiveness in criminal justice administration, and above all, inspire public confidence in the nation's justice system. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, as we seek to put Nigeria and Nigerian citizens back on the spotlight of the international development agenda by engaging with the public on transparent, accountable, and participatory governance, we call on international development partners to assist in realizing these goals. It is my hope that this dialogue will throw up fresh perspectives on all the issues slated for discussions and become a significant event in the history of our anti-corruption efforts in Nigeria. I look forward to robust contributions by all stakeholders, and I assure Your Excellencies that the Ministry of Justice and indeed all the administration of justice institutions will stand ready to diligently implement all the outcome of this dialogue as may be decided by government. Consolidation of efforts and collaboration of institutions in lawmaking, enforcement, and judicial interpretation of the laws in the direction of anti-corruption undertone is the answer. Finally, I welcome all of you to this dialogue and wish you fruitful deliberation. I thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable AG. Let's just indicate that working with the Office of the AG, PACAC, and other stakeholders, taking a look at the strategy document that Jude raised. And in very short, I think the first meeting is coming up on the 14th of this month. And very shortly, you'll be hearing about this strategy document. It's going to be made public very shortly. It gives me great pleasure and honor, and indeed, to welcome the new Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onnoghen, who was confirmed by the Senate yesterday. And this event is his first public outing since that, and I think it is providential. Please give him a very warm, round welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. The acting president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, GCON. The chairman of the occasion, chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, and members of that body, the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, Malami Esquire SAN, and other ministers of the Federal Republic here present, my Lord, the Justices of the Supreme Court, and other judicial officers here present, members of the high table, whether you are in the first or the second or the third. For everybody is important and you are recognized. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the diplomatic corps, may I also fall in line, whether rightly or wrongly, in adapting the existing protocols. Thank you very much and good morning. What do I say in an event of this nature? National Dialogue on Corruption. As you can observe, I'm not here with a prepared speech because I can't have one. As a head of the Nigerian judiciary, the issue of corruption is a sensitive one. The judiciary finds itself being battered left, right, and center. So what should the Chief Justice of Nigeria say on an occasion like this, which will not appear as if he's in defense of his institution or shielding the bad eggs, few of which I admit exist? Or just what should I say? Except to assure Nigerians that the Nigerian judiciary remains very much committed and in complete support of the efforts at curbing corruption in Nigeria, and is thankful to the committee and other agencies engaged in the fight against the scourge. I will like us to realize that corruption thrives, or any other form of injustice thrives in a culture of impunity. Wherever you have a culture of impunity, you will have corruption. Because people believe, I must have this, either this or nothing. It must be me and me alone. So they throw away the constitutional provisions that have been crafted to guide our daily activities, intergovernmental and interpersonal. They throw away the principles of the rule of law. But the judiciary holds these principles dear, because that is the only way by which you can ensure an orderly society and ensure the growth and maintenance of democracy and justice for all. So if you are to fight corruption, then you should fight the culture of impunity, which is an attitudinal phenomenon, by adhering strictly to the constitutional provisions and the rule of law. If we allow the rule of law to reign, then you will agree with me that there will be a dramatic reduction in corruption and injustice. That is, speaking for myself, that is how I see it. But you ask yourself, corruption, the judiciary always stands accused. In fact, it appears that the paint and the brush, when you see what is being painted of the judiciary, it seems to be an institution that epitomizes corruption. That is not fair. That is not correct. The Nigerian judicial officer is a gentleman. You have gentlemen on that bench. And by the nature of that institution, the judiciary, it is crafted and designed in such a way that the judicial officer can only be seen, not heard. Not that he has nothing to say, even in defense of himself. So when you are dealing with even judicial corruption where one exists, you ought to do it in accordance with the rule of law, and then channel whatever you have through the appropriate channels so that you don't destroy that institution, because destroying it will not do us any good. It will do us more harm than good. The picture is also painted as if the judiciary is not doing enough. Yes, we can do more. But for now, you have EFCC, ICPC, for instance, giving us data of cases that they have been successfully prosecuting in the courts of law. That is the judiciary. So if the judiciary is not doing well, is that not a report card from them? That the judiciary is working in respect of their cases. So whatever problems that exist in the course of prosecuting their cases, let them bring them up, identify them, and let us see how best we can improve on the system. Not to make it appear as if the judiciary is not doing anything. If the lawyers, because it takes 3 people, as I said yesterday, to prosecute a case. You have the investigator who has to investigate. You have the prosecutor who has to prosecute based on the result or evidence gathered from the investigation. Then you have the judge who has to weigh and balance the scale between the accused person and the government, the power that be, and come to a decision. So when you have a shoddily investigated case, poorly prosecuted one, and you expect the judge who is under oath, judicial oath, to do justice to all manner of persons without fear of favor, affection, or ill will. You expect him, on balancing the scale, to convict willy-nilly. That can never be done. I can assure you of that. No judicial officer will get himself involved with that. You know why? Because a judicial officer's witness is time. Time is the only witness for a judicial officer. So only time can tell. Tomorrow, these things will be reviewed. He could have committed suicide by the decision he arrived at, if the facts do not support it. I have gone through, called the heads of courts, judiciaries in this country, federal and state courts, and they furnish me with data on EFCC, ECPC, ICPC, terrorism cases, and high-profile commercial cases. And one thing that emerges is, funny enough, that most of the cases are abandoned in the courts. When you see statistics, so many cases have been filed, this and that, and this is the only thing, and this one's prosecution is not going on, or judgment has not been delivered. These cases had been abandoned. The judge is always there, he's there. But if a prosecutor gets to a roadblock and he decides to just abandon and just find a reason and stop coming to court or these things, there is instruction to the judicial officers that they should not strike out as a policy matter. They should not strike out such basic cases. They should remain there. You see, because the trap is that tomorrow when they start striking them out, you say, oh, the judiciary is striking out these cases. But you have to prosecute the cases to judgment, to conclusion. So I wish you very, very, very good time, and to you to look at this thing holistically, and then let us have the way forward. But remember always that the judicial officer can only be seen and not heard. So whatever decision the agencies involved are to take, they should not put us in a situation in which later on when the truth comes out and a big mess had been committed and the man cannot be, he spends the whole of his life under that kind of yoke. It is not only demoralizing, it is killing the spirit of the judiciary. So I wish you very good deliberations, and thank you very much indeed for listening.
Let's give my Lord the Chief Justice a round
Justice
of applause.
of Nigeria there, Honorable Justice Walter Onoge, is obviously making his first official appearance as the substantive CJN, having been confirmed by the National Assembly barely 24 hours ago. Under his watch, he says, the judiciary will have zero tolerance for corruption, as no one will be allowed to pocket the judiciary, being the last hope of the common man. This goes to show that the three arms of government have greater role to play if corruption must become history.
Sweep and sweep very clean. Please, let's give Justice Onoge another round of applause. He has spoken like an elder. Minor modification in our program to enable the acting president take his trip out of Abuja, which is scheduled, and he had moved it in order to join us here. It gives me great pleasure, honor, and humility to invite, to give a speech and to declare our conversation open, the acting president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let's rise as Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
Thank you very much. My Lord, the Honorable Chief Justice of the Federation, Honorable Justice Walter Onoge, the chair of the Senate Committee on Anti-Corruption, Senator Chukwuka Otazi, the Chairman, House Committee on Economic and Financial Crimes, Honorable Kayode Oladele, members of the Federal Executive Council, the Chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption on Anti-Corruption, Professor Ishesage, SAN. Honorable Justices here present, our partners, Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, and the Open Society, West Africa. Members of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, heads of agencies and parastatals, Your Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say first that it's a very special pleasure indeed to be here, and a duty also to be here at this very important dialogue on corruption. The President, Commander-in-Chief, President Buhari, would have wanted to be here himself. As a matter of fact, we had said that he must be the one to declare this open. So I'm here representing him, and also here personally because of my own involvement with PACAC. But I bring you warm greetings from him, and I'm sure that most of us know that this is a matter that's particularly close to his heart, this question of corruption. He it was who said that if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill us. I think we're well on the path to ensuring that we don't die from corruption. There are those who may wonder why another anti-corruption gathering and what another one will achieve. And my answer is as follows. First, corruption, as we all seem to agree, is an existential threat to Nigeria, both as a nation and as a viable economic entity. Clearly, there is no doubt whatsoever that whether, and every arm of government can excuse itself, every arm of society, every part of society can excuse itself, but the truth of the matter is that we all know that corruption in Nigeria is systemic. It doesn't matter whether it is the executive arm of government, the judiciary, or the legislature. Every arm of government is involved in this systemic and life-threatening social anomaly called corruption. There's no question at all. And it affects all segments of society. It affects the religious. It affects even civil society groups. There's no one in our nation that can say they're not in one way or the other, not necessarily even complicit, but at least under some influence or the other, or some of the implications of corruption. So I think we should leave the finger pointing, because the finger pointing is unhelpful. What is important is that we recognize that there is a major problem here. What I'd like us to do, if that is possible in the course of this dialogue, is to look at models that have worked elsewhere and to see whether those models are somewhat applicable here, to look at best practices, to look at some models that have worked. The truth of the matter is that there is nothing peculiar about the Nigerian citizen or the Nigerian type. Corruption thrives where it is allowed to thrive. And there are many societies that have been that have found themselves in worse circumstances than Nigeria and have somehow managed to solve the problems, their problems. I remember listening to Nika Guilleri, the former Prime Minister of Georgia. And one of the things that he said, which I found quite amazing, was that at some point in Georgia, they had power for just about 2 hours every day. And that one day, the people actually went out rioting. And the reason why they were rioting was not because they had shortage of power, because they only had power for 2 hours a day, but because they were not told exactly when those 2 hours will be, whether it will be in the morning or in the evening. And so they went out rioting on that account. And he said something that I even found more fascinating, especially for a European country. He said that that there were so many people, over 50% of citizens were actually stealing power. In other words, they were using illegal connections, and they were stealing power, not paying for power. And when you look at all of that, you think, that if you were not told which country it was, you might suspect that it is the country you're in. But the truth is that was what was happening in another country. And then he told us how they solved the problem, what steps were taken. And then, of course, he mentioned other aspects of corruption, of corrupt practices, so many and so varied that you would have thought that he was actually talking about our own situation. But he then went on to describe how these problems were solved. And it's my respectful submission that we can really solve the problems of corruption in this country if we adopt some of those best practices. I'll give just one example, and it's not necessarily a perfect example, but I think it might be useful. In Lagos State, when in 1999 the new civilian administration came into office, I was Attorney General, I was appointed Attorney General then, and we knew that there was a problem with the judiciary. I'd worked with civil society, I'd worked with 2 anti-corruption organizations, and I was quite familiar with some of the issues and some of the problems. One of the things we did was that we conducted a survey, and this was a survey on the high courts in Lagos. And we asked a question from 200 practitioners, regular practitioners in the courts. And we asked a simple question. Well, we asked many questions, but the important one for this occasion is, we asked the question what their impression was about integrity in the judiciary. And it was a scale: corrupt, notoriously corrupt, very corrupt, not corrupt, etc. And 89% of those legal practitioners who practice regularly in the courts of Lagos State said that the judiciary was notoriously corrupt. Notoriously corrupt, 89%. Now, and you see, the point of the matter is that when you look at it, obviously, when the judiciary is notoriously corrupt, it also means that the entire administration of justice system, because when you speak about the judiciary, it's not just about judges sitting down, it's an administration of justice system issue. There are clerks, there are lawyers, everyone is involved in this. A judge cannot sit down and just be corrupt. Everybody is involved in corrupt practices. That's what it means. We then decided that we had to deal with the problem. And how would we deal with the problem? We looked at several issues. One was the system of appointments. How were judges appointed? Of course, at that time, judges were simply appointed on what we call a man, no man basis. There was no real objective way of appointing justices. You simply, if you knew someone who was politically connected, or you were favored in one way or the other, that was simply how these were appointed. There was no particular system, and no particular tests were done. No proper investigation, aside from state security investigation, no proper investigations were done. If you look at some of the systems that we've inherited, the UK system, for instance, there's a process of almost 17 different tests before you can become a judge of the High Court. And so we decided in Lagos that we would at least put in place some system for appointment of justices and tests and interviews. And we decided that would be one of the most important things we would do. The second thing, we looked at the welfare of the judges. I visited a judge when I was teaching in the University of Lagos. This judge had been retired for 10 years, and when I went to see him, he was living in somebody's boys' quarters, 2 rooms. One room was full of books, which was his living room. There was hardly space to sit. And then the other was his bedroom, where he lived with his wife. His children were all grown up. But I just looked at the state and circumstance that this man lived in, and it was just pathetic. And I realized immediately that anyone at all who came to that place, or a young person who thought, I'd want to be a judge, would certainly not want to be this kind of judge. But this was an honest man. He was a man who lived his life, earned his salary, And everyone knows that a justice's salary or a judge's salary simply cannot build a house. There's no way, no matter how you calculate it. After that, I sat with the justices, the judges of the court in Lagos, 7 of the most senior judges as Attorney General, and we all sat together and we looked at how much judges were being paid then. They were being paid at the time 67,000 naira. And we looked at what it cost them to pay children's school fees, what it cost to do several different things. At the point, as we were calculating the cost, obviously it was well beyond 67,000 naira. One of them said, Attorney General, why don't you just stop this? This is just a farce, as you know. There's nobody who can live on this 67,000 naira. So it's quite obvious that most of them were clearly not living on that salary. So we decided that we would do something about judicial remuneration and about judicial welfare. And so every judge in Lagos is given a home to live in forever. And once you're a judge, you're given a house, and that's your house. Not an official residence, it is your house for life. And so you can take it away when you can live in it and take it away when you leave service. We also increased remuneration considerably. We increased it so considerably that Lagos State became the benchmark for judicial pay, including the appellate courts. And we ensured, but all of those welfare issues, appointment issues, and all of that, I don't want to go into much detail. But the very important thing that we also did was to insist that if a judge is accused of any infraction, we would ensure that it is prosecuted, we'll ensure that it is investigated, and we'll ensure that there is a result. So what we did was simply, if a complaint was made against a judge, we simply sent it to the NJC and we followed up. We didn't even pass it through our Judicial Service Commission, because very frequently you found that was open to all sorts of political influence. So we sent it straight to the NJC. Cut a long story short, in the first year of our judicial reforms, we had sacked 22 magistrates for various acts of corruption. By the end of that year, 3 judges had lost their jobs because the NJC found that they were responsible for corruption. The NJC was quick and responsive, and we followed up. We made sure that we followed up. In 2006, we conducted a survey. We were assisted by some of our partners at the time. And we conducted the same survey that we had conducted in 1999. At this time, we found that 0% of judges of the High Court, and the lawyers were now saying that 0% of the judges of the High Court were corrupt, from 89% to 0%. Why did that happen? Now, we're looking at the judges. Now, why did that happen? Was it because these guys suddenly became saints or something transformed? No. It was because, first of all, a system was in place, and also impunity, just as my Lord the Chief Justice has said. Impunity was not allowed. You knew that if an infraction, if an allegation of an infraction was made, it will be investigated. Of course, there were several that were discovered to just be frivolous allegations and all that. But that you will be investigated, and if you're investigated, we will follow up on consequence. And I think that is important that we put in place models that will work. Because there's no point, saying, well, let's just hope that people will become good people or become better. Even the very best people, when they see that there is no consequence for bad behavior, they will one day begin to indulge in bad behavior themselves, especially when they see that bad behavior is in fact rewarded. So I think that we should make every effort, and this is one of the issues that we've been discussing. undermine the fight against corruption, practically anything, and I think that we must ensure that we are that we look out for those things. The campaign against corruption must connect corruption to the problems that we have. We must connect corruption to the problems we have. There's no way of excusing corruption or saying that it's just something that is just about people stealing money. People who steal money, especially official corruption, are stealing money that should be used to build schools, build hospitals, and to make life generally acceptable and easier for people. They are not people who are fighting communal rights, Because these days, somebody who is accused of corruption is even celebrated in his hometown and village, because people believe that perhaps, he has taken his own share of national cake, and perhaps somehow they might benefit from that share of the national cake. The truth is that nobody benefits his community or society directly. In the end, ultimately, the corruption destroys society and destroys everything that we stand for and that people themselves stand for. The last point I want to make is with respect to international cooperation. I think that one of the critical issues that we have discovered in our fight against corruption is that we need much more robust international cooperation, especially with respect to return of assets. We find that the process of returning assets, aside from the judicial process, the whole process of returning assets is so difficult and so complicated that it could just take you literally years to get assets returned, And I think that is important for it's important for countries of the world where stolen assets are located to work with us and to work with us in ensuring that these assets are returned speedily. We have, I know that the United Kingdom is working with us in particular on the beneficial register, on this issue of the beneficial register. That will be extremely useful for us because we'll now be able to discover who is behind some of the names, some of the names of companies and other shells that are used to hide stolen.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. One final assignment before His Excellency departs is the group photograph with the members of the Federal Executive Council right behind. The media people of the VP will take care of this. Members of the Federal Executive Council, the members of PACAC, those who are sitting on the first and second rows, the justices of the Supreme Court to join the photograph.
Acting President Yemi Osinbajo affirms the fact that the fight against corruption must continue despite the different shades of fighting back by the monster, usually clothed in ethnicity, religion, and political garments.
On the first and second row and the chairman of sessions, only 5 of them. Thank you. Very quickly, we take the group photograph so His Excellency can take a strip.
The program is gradually drawing to a close as we'll about be taking the group photographs now. Group and group.
I'll give it to them. Please, let's be quick. Thank you. The judges, yes, please. The judges of the Supreme Court, the first and second row. Thank you. The chairman of sessions only. Let's make it very quick and snappy. Thank you very much. Peter. Thank you very much. While you remain standing, sirs, we'll take the national anthem. Please stay where you are. The national anthem, please. Thank you. We remain standing as the acting president takes his leave. Thereafter,
President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, as part of the government's anti-corruption fight, constituted the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption in August 2015, and this is part of round-table dialogue on corruption, which stands to take off corruption out of this country. And it is on that note we drop the curtains on the live telecast of events of the National Dialogue on Corruption put together by the Office of the Vice President in collaboration with the Presidential Advisory Committee on Corruption, which was brought to you live from the services of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, the largest in Africa. Venue has been the banquet hall of the Presidential Villa, Abuja. On behalf of the outside broadcast crew, I thank you for being there as we return you to the studios for normal programs. Good morning once again. I am KG Busari Ahmed.
NTA, it's all about you.
Gas pipelines are the arteries for powering electricity. When the artery is burst, then the entire system collapses. Vandalizing gas pipelines is a criminal offense against the Nigerian people. Let us join hands and protect our gas pipelines from the enemies of Nigeria. Report any suspected vandal to the security operatives. Let us stop vandals before they destroy our collective national heritage, so we can have the Nigeria of our dreams, where there will be light at all times. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Network Service of the NDA.
I'm glad to have you join us again on the program from the National Assembly. I am Ignatius Nkwo. Well, on Thursdays, we bring to you live broadcasts of the House plenary. But as it is today, the House will not be sitting. Therefore, we bring to you a repeat of the House plenary.
I'm Honorable Ibrahim Ayokunde Isiaka. I represent the very good people of Q4, Ewekuru Federal Constituency. I'm from the Gateway State to Nigeria, Mr. Speaker, honorable members. I'm from Ogo State. I'm an Ogo man. I rise, Mr. Speaker, with the leave of the House. On matter of urgent public importance, subject to Order 8, Rule 4, for an urgent appeal, search, and unconditional release of kidnapped teachers, workers, and students from Nigerian Turkish International College, Isheri in Ogo State, which falls within the purview of my constituents. I so move, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Motion say aye. Those against it say nay. Ayes have it.
My name is Karimi Sunday. I'm from Kogi State. I represent Yagba Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, my colleague, I come under Order 8, Rule 4, matter of urgent public importance. The motion is on the need for the House to investigate the 100 billion naira released by CBN for construction of modern mini ranches in the country. My colleagues, barely 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago, Governor Gabriel Zuzan, the then governor of Benue State, addressed a press conference after the Economic Council meeting that the Economic Council of Nigeria had approved that modern mini ranches be established across some states in Nigeria, and that the CBN should release 100 million for this purpose. But 100 billion for this purpose. Shortly thereafter, the CBN released 100 billion. They loaded out 100 billion for this construction. Nigerians, communities, and states are represented here. Ask your people, have you seen any mini modern ranches being constructed anywhere in Nigeria in the last 2 years? Where is that 100 billion? Nigerians need to know. We can see all over the nation killings in the name of ranching and grazing reserves across the nation. But money has been provided for construction of ranches. Where is this money? That is the purpose why I have come this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we suspend Order 8, Rule 4, Sub-Rule 4, to allow the House to take more than 2 matters of urgent public importance this morning. I so move.
I am Mark Tese Gbila, representing Gwe East, Gwe West Federal Constituency of Benue State. I rise under Order 8, Rule 4, matter of urgent public importance, and I crave the indulgence of Mr. Speaker and my very honorable colleagues to consider my motion on the urgent need to avert the impending strike action at the nation's insurance sector regulator, NICOM, and to investigate the protracted face-off between the Commission's management and the labor union of the Commission over reported cases of intimidation, victimization, and discrimination. My very honorable colleagues, this very critical sector of the economy is about to be thrown into jeopardy if the strike action, which is supposed to take effect from tomorrow, is allowed to continue. So I crave your indulgence to please consider this matter as a matter of urgent public importance. Thank you very much.
I rise to, Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek the leave of the House to move a motion of urgent public importance under Order 8 Rule 4 for the suspension of the proceedings of the House to allow me move this motion on yesterday's accidental air strike on IDP camps that has led to the death of so many internally displaced persons at Ran